We are ready to go.
Great. Good morning or good afternoon, Your Honor. May we make appearances for the court?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Dworkin, and I, along with my co-counsel, Mr. Brendan Flynn.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
We represent the plaintiff in today's case, Mr. Jordan Street. Would opposing counsel like to state appearances?
Yes, Your Honor, I would like to. Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kevin Littlejohn II. I, along with my co-counsel, Ms. Madeline Light, are here today proudly representing the defendant in this matter, Coach Reese Taylor. I would like the court to be aware that we do have one or two procedural matters that we're ready to present to the court when ready, as well as one substantive matter.
Yes, Your Honor, we do have a few housekeeping matters as well. May I begin with those?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to invoke Rule 615, which calls for the constructive sequestration of all witnesses.
Is there any issue with that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, constructively, yes.
And Your Honor, as we are on a Zoom trial, I would just ask for your preferences for movement about the well. May we sit down, stand up, and move around throughout the screen?
You may just be conscious of not stepping out of the screen so that we can see what's going on, but feel free to move.
Yes, Your Honor. And as we are on this virtual context, is it okay if we're publishing exhibits for Your Honors and the witnesses to see? Is it okay if we do that through a screen share?
Absolutely, yes.
Great, Your Honor. With that, we have no further housekeeping matters, but we do have a few motions in limine.
Okay, go ahead.
Your Honor, I did have a chance to speak with Mr. Littlejohn before trial, and we have agreed to the admissibility of Exhibit 3, which is a photograph of Rory Street. We were hoping to be able to use that during our opening statement.
So you've agreed to that?
Yes, that's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
And Your Honor, at this time, we would also move to exclude any mention of any drug usage that Rory Street may have engaged in prior to September 7th, 2018. We don't dispute that Ms. Street may have been found with drugs in her system the day that she died, but any drug usage that she may have participated in before the date of her death is not relevant to today's trial and would only go to prejudice yourself, Your Honor.
And what's the response to that?
Yes, Your Honor. If I understand the opposing counsel correctly, I believe she raised an objection under relevancy. And the bar for relevancy is extremely low. Federal Rules of Evidence state that evidence is relevant if it has a tendency to make any fact of consequence more or less probable. And what Your Honor will hear today is that there are two competing views on what happened on September 7th, 2018. And the defense case is that the decedent, Rory Street, actually was abusing an illegal substance, cocaine. There's a teacher and a trainer that is familiar or may be familiar with Rory's use of this substance, and therefore it'd be relevant for Your Honor to hear that evidence to determine whether or not the use of that drug and the continued use of that drug could have been the cause of the death of the decedent. For that reason, it's relevant at trial here today.
So, plaintiff, what are your grounds to exclude this?
Your Honor, the grounds for that any drug usage that Rory Street may have engaged in prior to the day that she died is not relevant to the cause of her death. We don't believe that opposing counsel is going to be able to lay that foundation that actually contributed to her death, any drug usage prior to her death. Furthermore, any of that evidence that comes out, we believe is going to come out through a witness by deposition. And as such, we don't believe that they're going to be able to lay the proper foundation necessary, as Mr. Littlejohn was just speaking about in his response to my objection.
Okay, so I'm going to deny that right now. However, if they can't lay that proper foundation later, you're free to bring this up again.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, we're ready to proceed.
Okay. Defense, do you have any pretrial motions?
Yes, Your Honor. Just one procedural matter. Your Honor, prior to trial, pursuant to the pretrial order, you have stipulated that exhibits 18 and 19 are pre-admitted. I would like to make the court aware that we do intend to offer that testimony at trial here today. Additionally, I'd like to ask the court's permission for all deposition testimony from unavailable witnesses or the exhibit 18 and 19 witness be read by my co-counsel, Ms. Madeline Light.
That's fine, yes.
Now, Your Honor, turning to the substantive motions, by way of brief background, this is a wrongful death suit that the plaintiff has brought against Coach Reese Taylor. And we anticipate a trial here today. There'll be evidence that is shown that Coach Reese Taylor did not breach the duty of care he owed to the decedent. However, we anticipate that opposing counsel will try to present a form of evidence by way of character evidence to somehow insinuate that because he had a prior bad act, that he acted accordance in that act on September 7, 2018. And Your Honor, under the Federal Rule of Evidence 404, that is a propensity purpose, which is inadmissible in a civil case. And so we ask that you exclude any mentioning of Coach Taylor being violent or physical in any other role with any other player.
Is there any specific instance that you're talking about?
Yes, Your Honor. While Coach Taylor was a coach at a different school earlier on in his life, it was alleged that he in fact put his hands on a student and pushed him down to the ground.
Okay, and your response?
Your Honor, we have no problem with not mentioning that, as we don't plan to bring out propensity testimony today, so long as opposing counsel doesn't open the door to that line of questioning.
Okay, then it is excluded subject to someone opening the door to that.
Okay, and secondly, Your Honor, I'm turning your attention to Exhibit 14 and 15, which you previously ruled as authentic, which previously stipulated as authentic. We ask that at this time, we go ahead and admit those two exhibits into evidence as them being stipulated as authentic. There's no other basis for which they should be excluded under hearsay because they are in fact what they purport to be, which would be a public record, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, is there any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. While we did agree that these exhibits are authentic, we would object to their admissibility under hearsay grounds under Rule 802. These are out-of-court statements that are being brought into court to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
Okay, I'm not going to admit them right now, but when you intend to use them, you can feel free to lay whatever foundation is necessary and we'll deal with it at that time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Is there anything further?
With that, Your Honor, defense is ready to proceed.
Okay, plaintiff, if you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court? I want to tell you about a boy named Rory Street. Rory was a bright young man, loved by his friends and his family. In the fall of 2018, Rory began his senior year at Waco High, a time normally filled with standardized tests, college applications, and teenage anxiety. Rory's high school career was defined by his love for soccer. You'll hear today that Rory was the star forward for the varsity soccer team. His coaches, friends, and families all raved about his talent. Division I recruiters were always watching him at his games, and his teammates thought that he was a shoo-in for a D1 scholarship. His future was shining. On September 7th, 2018, that future was taken from him. While at soccer practice that day, Rory Street dropped dead. For you to understand why Rory Street dropped dead that day, I need to introduce you to the defendant in today's case, Mr. Reese Taylor. Now, Mr. Taylor was Rory's soccer coach at Waco High. And you'll hear today that at Waco High School, you don't stop when you're tired. You don't stop when you're sick. You stop when Coach Taylor says stop. You'll hear today that on September 7th, 2018, in the Texas heat, Coach Taylor never said stop. You'll hear today that on September 7th, Mr. Taylor decided to punish Rory for his performance that day. He ordered Rory to go off on the sidelines and run Burma Road. Now, you're going to hear a lot about Burma Road today, so I want to make sure we all understand what that means. You're going to hear that running Burma Road entails sprinting for 30 yards, dribbling a ball for another 30 yards, shooting that ball at an open net, and then bear crawling on your hands and feet another 60 yards back to the start just to do it all over again. Me, I probably wouldn't even be able to do that once. You're going to hear today that Rory didn't have to do this just once. She didn't have to do it 2 times. She had to do it until Mr. Taylor said she could stop. Well, Rory was tough, but you're going to hear today that on that day, it was over 100 degrees, that Rory was not given any water breaks, and Rory was not allowed to rest or cool off in the shade. Instead, after running Burma Road in the heat, Mr. Taylor decided to punish Rory even further. He called Rory back to the main field and started doing slide tackle drills with him. Now, you're going to hear about slide tackle drills today, and they are a common thing in soccer. It's where someone with the ball is dribbling, and then an opponent will slide feet first at your legs to try to steal the ball away from you. It's common and it happens all the time. But this punishment that Coach Taylor ordered on Rory was something quite different. Coach Taylor ordered the other players to run at Rory full speed and slide right into his legs, knocking him over and over again. Now, Rory didn't just have to practice this once. He had to practice it 15 times in a row. And each time he got knocked down, Coach Taylor told him to get back up and get ready for another tackle. You'll hear today that Coach Taylor wasn't satisfied when Rory got knocked down just 1 time. He wasn't satisfied with Rory being tackled 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times. Mr. Taylor wasn't satisfied until Rory was tackled for that 15th time. You'll hear that 15th time, Rory didn't get back up. He died right there on the field. It's because of this that Rory's mother, Jordan, is bringing a wrongful death suit against the defendant. And in doing so, we have assumed what's called a burden of proof. Now, this means that we have to prove each element of our claim today by a preponderance of the evidence, simply more likely than not. And we have to show you 3 things today. First, that Coach Taylor owed a duty to Rory to conduct practices in a reasonable and safe manner. Second, that Coach Taylor breached that duty. And third, that breach was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. We will meet our burden today. And to do so, we're going to present some witness testimony, some live and some by deposition. You'll hear today from Aubrey Saccharin, Rory's friend and teammate. Aubrey was on the field with Rory on the day in question, September 7, 2018, and he saw everything leading up to Rory's death. He'll tell you about how hot it was that day, about how the team members weren't given enough water breaks, or really any breaks at all, and about how he's never seen a punishment so extreme in all of his time playing soccer. He'll tell you about how Rory didn't look good, about how he was pale and sickly and visibly struggling with the punishment. And yet, Mr. Taylor never said stop. You'll also hear today that Mr. Taylor specifically created these punishments in an attempt to train his players. Despite the fact that their games normally happen in the evening, Mr. Taylor specifically chose to practice at the hottest time of the day because he thought it would toughen up the players. He specifically chose to send Rory to run Burma Road because he thought that he needed to learn a lesson. You're going to hear today that Coach Taylor specifically designed the slide tackling drill because it involved a lot of physical contact, because it was a hard tackle. because he wanted Rory to get the point. All of this despite being warned of the dangers of such practices and having industry standards prohibiting such behavior. Mr. Taylor didn't care. September 7th, 2018 was a tragedy. A handsome young man with a bright future lost his life. Throughout today's trial, I ask that you think about how this could have been avoided and how if Mr. Taylor had acted differently, had acted reasonably, Rory might still be alive. At the end of today's trial, I'll stand where I'm standing now. I'll review all of the evidence that we will hear throughout today's trial, and I'll ask you to find the only verdict that the evidence allows. I'll ask you to find the defendant liable.
Defense, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor. Just a brief second to readjust my webcam.
Sure.
Ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
May it please the court. Dangerous substances have dangerous consequences. And in September of 2018, while the decedent, Rory Street, was under the influence of a dangerous substance, cocaine, he fell victim to the tragic risk that that dangerous substance causes, which is death. Good morning, Your Honor, or good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kevin Littlejohn II, and I, along with my co-counsel, Ms. Madeline Light, are here today proudly representing the defendant in this matter, Coach Reese Taylor. Now, you've already heard a little bit about Coach Taylor, but I too want to take a moment and familiarize you with him. Your Honor, Coach Taylor's a member of our community right here in Waco. He's committed his career to ensuring the children in our community receive the good coaching that he can provide. And he's here today asking that you not find him responsible for the death of the decedent. Now, before we discuss the evidence you'll hear, Your Honor, I need to take you back to September. In September of 2018, the decedent is experiencing a sensory overload. His mind is beginning to be pulled several different directions. He's struggling with the thought that in just a few months, he'll have to decide where he'll be attending college. He's dealing with the reality that he has to perform well in school. He's struggling with the expectation of his parents. And he's even dealing with the harsh reality that many high school students face. And that's the influence of drugs. And with all those different pressures in his mind, the decedent succumbs to that influence. And he ingests cocaine. And then practice arrives. The decedent makes his way to the locker room after school one day, walking along with his teammates, discussing everything that happened that day, but the fact that he has cocaine in his system. The decedent grabs his jersey, his cleats, his soccer ball, and he heads directly to the field for practice. And he waits for 3 o'clock. And when 3 o'clock arrives, so does Coach Taylor. And all day, Coach Taylor has been planning what he will do at practice that day. He knows what drills he wants to run. He knows what formations they need to use to win, but he does not know that his star player, the decedent, is currently metabolizing cocaine. The coach begins to notice that the decedent
is lagging behind in practice. Like any good coach, he addresses it. He talks to the decedent and tells the decedent that he wants him to participate in drills. The decedent begins to participate, and suddenly, to the shock of the team and Coach Taylor, the decedent collapses on the field as he fell victim to the risk, the consequences of his dangerous decision. And Your Honor, it's the decedent's decision to ingest that dangerous substance that has brought us here today. Now, as you just heard from opposing counsel, this is a wrongful death suit that plaintiff has brought before you. And it's true, they have the burden of proof here today. But what they must do is bring to you the evidence you will need by the greater weight of that evidence to convince to you that Coach Taylor owed the decedent a duty, that he breached that duty, and that because he breached that duty, he caused the death of the decedent. Your Honor, the plaintiff will fail to meet that burden today. However, in an attempt to convince you otherwise, as you just heard from opposing counsel, they'll call several witnesses before you. And we anticipate you'll hear from an expert, you'll hear from the father, you'll hear from the friend. And I want you to know that the expert the plaintiff will call, you'll learn has never once testified at trial. You'll learn that expert has no degree in toxicology. And no matter what the father of the decedent says, you'll have to admit that he pushed his son to never show weakness, to never complain. And that even he, when he played soccer, participated in the Burma Road drill. And then lastly, you'll hear from a friend of the decedent. And no matter what she says on the stand today, she'll also have to admit that on September 7th, 2018, she participated in the Burma Road drill longer than the decedent. She'll have to tell you that she didn't even tell Coach Taylor that the decedent was experiencing any difficulties. And you'll also learn that that friend had been upset at the coach for taking away her full-time starting position. And then once you hear from the plaintiff's witnesses, you'll hear from our witnesses. And we're going to call before you 3. You'll hear 2 through deposition testimony and 1 through live witness testimony. And the first testimony you'll hear is that of Mr. London. You'll learn from Mr. London, who has a degree in toxicology, that the cause of the decedent's death is cocaine. Then you'll hear from the trainer for the Waco soccer team. You'll learn from him that, yes, he was present on the day of practice, that he was never told that the decedent was experiencing any difficulties, and that he actually was familiar with a note that may have indicated the decedent was using drugs. And then lastly, you'll hear from Coach Taylor. And Coach Taylor is going to walk you through the care that he had for the members of our community. He's going to talk to you about the 26 years he's committed to coaching children. You'll learn that he's committed to excellence, but he's committed to doing the right way. And you'll also hear from him that the plaintiff or the decedent never once told him that he was tired. And so at the conclusion of all that evidence and testimony, I'm going to come back before you. And I too am going to summarize all the facts and all the evidence that you hear today. And I'm confident that you will return a verdict finding that Coach Taylor is not liable. And I know this is exactly what you will do because, Your Honor, the evidence today will show that on September 7th, 2018, it was the decedent's and his dangerous decision to ingest a dangerous drug that caused the tragic demise which resulted in his death. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Plaintiff, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, but before we call our first witness to the stand, may I read an excerpt of an exhibit that has been pre-admitted onto the record?
Which exhibit is this?
Exhibit 16. This is the expert report of Dr. Mcconaughey.
Okay, and defense, any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Mr. Flynn, will you please put exhibit 16 up for us? Wanted to draw the court's attention to page 2, where it says overview of opinions. Dr. Mcconaughey said Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke. And then moving on to page 3 in the bottom paragraph, the first sentence, drawing the court's attention to Dr. Mcconaughey's opinion, where it says, it is also my opinion within a reasonable degree of medical certainty that Rory Street's death was not a result of cocaine use. And with that, Your Honor, at this time, we would like to call Jordan Street by deposition.
Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jordan Street.
How old are you?
I'm 55 years old.
And skipping to line 15 on that same page, do you have any children?
I did. My son, Rory.
Skipping to line 23, what happened to Rory?
He died at a soccer practice on September 7th, 2018.
Skipping to page 4, line 14, was soccer something the two of you shared?
You know, I played soccer in college, so I already loved the game, but I didn't care what the sport was. I just loved having a kid that was into sports of any kind. I loved getting up on the weekends when he was little to go kick the ball in the backyard and let him try and dribble it past me. I loved talking about games and strategy. It brought back so many memories of my playing days, but this was even better because it was my kid and it made him so happy. By the time Rory was in high school, we even had a favorite team, West Ham United, that we would root on together every weekend during the English Premier League season. We loved going to T-Bone's barbecue to watch matches. I thought we would forever be blowing bubbles.
What position did you play?
I was a starting striker. Loved it.
Do you still play, like in local non-competitive matches?
No. I had to quit my junior year of college because I had a pretty serious injury during a game. An opposing player slide tackled me from behind and broke my leg and ankle in several places. I could have played my senior year, but I just wasn't as good as I used to be and decided not to continue. I enjoyed playing with Rory while he was young, though.
Skipping to page 8, line 9. Are slide tackles violent?
They can be. I mean, it's soccer, so a lot of the injuries are pretend acting. But anytime you're running full speed and you slide feet first at another player's legs, that can be a dangerous situation.
Why are they dangerous?
I mean, I just mentioned breaking my leg in college from getting slide tackled. That was only a few minutes ago. Were you listening?
Turning to the next page, page 9, line 3. Is it important to teach slide tackling as a coach?
Yes, it is. But that isn't what happened here. This wasn't a drill to teach Rory how to slide tackle or defend against them. Rory knew how to slide tackle and how to avoid them. This was about punishment. Coach Taylor lost his temper and went too far.
Your Honor, I have an objection to this testimony.
Yes.
I believe the opposing counsel is asking for speculation on behalf of Jordan Street.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
Opposing counsel had the opportunity to object to the form of these questions when the deposition was being given, and because no such objection was made, the question was asked, and now this deposition is all that we have.
So is there no objection to the form at all in the deposition?
No, Your Honor.
Defense?
I'm under the impression that all we agreed to was that she would be reading deposition testimony. I was under the impression that as the testimony was being read, I could then object to any line of questioning that I felt was inadmissible.
Okay, I'll overrule that.
Mr. Flynn, could you please continue reading from line 4?
Yes. Yes, it is, but that isn't what happened here. This wasn't a drill to teach Rory how to slide tackle or defend against them. Rory knew how to slide tackle and how to avoid them. This was about punishment. Coach Taylor lost his temper and went too far. That drill wasn't necessary. In all the time that I played, coached, and watched soccer, I've never seen a drill like that. Not once.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is all that I was planning on reading from this witness.
Okay, defense, do you have anything you want to read in?
Yes, Your Honor. Permission for my co-counsel to unhide, restrain, and...
Of course.
Good afternoon, Ms. Light.
Good afternoon.
Do you have the deposition testimony of Jordan Street for you?
I do.
Turning to page 3, starting with line 1. Let me know when you get it.
I'm there.
Were you there at practice that day?
No, I was at work.
So do you have any information or knowledge about what happened that day?
No, other than what I've heard from others about what happened, but I didn't see it.
Turning to page 4, line 4. Was Rory good?
Oh, Rory was a superb athlete. He had gotten several scholarship offers from Division I programs to play soccer in college. Southern Methodist University, Dallas Baptist University, Austin College, and the University of Texas at Dallas. They had all offered him a scholarship. It was so exciting to think about him being able to watch him play at the top level in college against some of the best in the country. Plus, he would have gotten a great education. He had such a bright future, and I was excited to see it all play out.
Did you push Rory to be an athlete? Turning to page 5, line 12.
I don't know if I would use the word push. I encouraged Rory to work hard at sports and at everything else in his life. I taught Rory to never show weakness and to never complain. I wanted him to be tough, to play through the pain, because that is what makes a champion. Rory was tough, and I made him tough.
Did you ever hold Rory back in school?
We did, just 1 year. I held him back in the 7th grade so that he could get bigger and faster, which we thought would give him an advantage in high school playing against younger kids. I know it sounds a bit crazy, but it's actually pretty common now. College is expensive, and we wanted to give Rory the best chance we could at getting a scholarship. Hell, Rory might have been good enough to go pro. I certainly saw that possibility and encouraged Rory to keep that option open.
And Your Honor, I apologize for the profane language. I should have pre-warned you.
No problem.
Turning to page 6, line 18. Was Rory a discipline problem?
No, not any more than other kids that age. I mean, he was a little wild and liked to have fun, but he wasn't some hippie smoking dope behind the school or some party animal who stayed out all night. Rory got in trouble a few times, and I got called by the principal a few times, but it was just normal teenage stuff, being late to class, goofing around, or missing some homework assignments. I was confident that he would graduate and go to college. I know that.
Turning your attention to page 7, question 3. Do you believe that discipline is important for a kid?
Yes, 100% yes. You know, my granddaddy always said, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I believe in that. You can't let them get away with being lazy and entitled. You have to keep them in line.
Line 19. When you were playing soccer at Waco, did you ever have to run Burma Road?
Hell yeah, we did. I remember doing that when we were dogging it, or if we weren't in the correct position or something. Coach would send us off to run Burma Road. But I'll tell you this, none of my coaches ever made me or any other kid keep going when it was obvious that we were exhausted. Discipline is one thing, but that is just dangerous.
Apologize again for the language, Your Honor, but that concludes the deposition testimony from the defense.
Okay.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to call Aubrey Saracen to the stand.
Okay.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Aubrey Saracen.
How old are you, Aubrey?
I'm 18 years old.
Do you go to school here in Waco?
I do. I go to Waco High.
Are you involved in any clubs or sports at school?
I've been on the varsity soccer team since going to Waco, so for the last 4 years.
So is it safe to say you were on the team in 2018?
Yes, I was.
What position do you play?
Center midfielder.
And Aubrey, throughout your time on the Waco High soccer team, did you meet Rory Street?
I did. He was my best friend. I grew up with him, and we've been great friends our entire lives.
What was Rory's role on the team?
He was a striker. He was the best player on our team. He was the star, and if we ever won a game, I would say he was the main reason why.
You said that he was a star. What happened to him?
On September 7th, 2018, Rory passed away
Where did he pass away?
on our soccer field, on our practice field.
Were you at practice that day?
I was.
Aubrey, I know this might be difficult for you to talk about the death of your friend, but I have to ask you some questions about that day, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's okay.
What time was your practice on September 7th, 2018?
3:15, like it normally was.
Do you remember what the weather was like that day?
It was very hot. It was upwards of the hundreds. It's just an extremely hot Waco day.
Aubrey, do you normally play season games in the early afternoon like your practices were?
No, we usually play them in the evening at night when it's cooler.
When you play your games at night, is the sun still shining?
No,
Usually, is it still over 100 degrees?
no, it's not.
Aubrey, how did practice start for you on September 7th?
Well, we were scrimmaging that day, and we were doing that for about an hour, I would say, until I did something wrong, or I can't really remember what I did, but the coach asked me to go run Burma Road.
And when you say your coach, was that Coach Taylor?
Yes, it was.
And what is Burma Road?
Burma Road is a drill that our Coach Taylor would make us do if we ever messed up or did something wrong, or if he just felt like we needed to get punished for something. And it's a drill where we would sprint 30 yards and then grab a ball, dribble that another 30 yards and kick it into an open net. And then we're supposed to bear crawl back those 60 yards. And then we just keep doing that until we're told to stop.
Will you explain what a bear crawl is?
Yeah, it's when you would get down on all fours and you're crawling as fast as you can, like a bear or like an animal.
Now, after you ran a lap of Burma Road in the heat that day, did you get to return to practice?
No, I kept doing it
Why did you keep on doing it?
because Coach Taylor hadn't told me to stop.
And did he ever tell you that you could stop running Burma Road that day?
No.
At any point, did Rory come and join you while you were doing your laps?
Yeah, about a couple minutes or a few moments after I was doing it, I heard Coach Taylor yelling at Rory pretty loud, saying something about how useless of a player Rory is and how he was just going to run him until he passed out. And then Rory came over and joined me on Burma Road.
When Rory came over to join you, how did he look?
He wasn't looking good. I remember how unusually pale he looked. He was panting. He was holding his chest, saying his chest felt funny.
Objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
The witness is testifying with hearsay statements.
A response?
Your Honor, we're happy to strike Rory's statement from the record if Your Honor would like. We're not intending to introduce this to prove that Rory was feeling funny. I think it's pretty clear that she was feeling funny by the fact that she later died that afternoon.
Okay, then the statements from the decedent will be stricken. That's the statement.
Yes, Your Honor. Oh, Aubrey, besides Coach Taylor, were there any other adults at this practice?
Just our trainer.
And were either of them watching you running lap after lap of the Burma Road?
No, they were over still with the rest of the team.
And Aubrey, would you recognize a picture of the Waco High practice field if I showed it to you?
I would.
And with Your Honor's permission, could the witness please look at Exhibit 2 in his digital exhibit binder?
Of course.
Let me know when you get there, Aubrey.
I have it.
And what is that a picture of?
That's a aerial view of Waco High's practice field.
Does that look to be fair and accurate?
Yes, it does.
And is there anything else on that photograph other than just the field?
There is a blue square around the practice field and a red square around where we run the Burma Road drill.
And do those squares accurately represent where the practice field was and where you would run Burma Road?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff would move to enter Exhibit 2 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
And at this time, Mr. Flynn, could you please publish Exhibit 2 through screen share? Now, Aubrey, can you explain where you and Rory were running Burma Road?
The middle of that red square is where we would be running the 60 yards back and forth.
And where was Coach Taylor while you were running Burma Road?
He was still on that blue rectangle with the rest of the team.
And where was the trainer?
Over on in the blue rectangle.
On this aerial view of the practice field, do you see any trees set up?
I do not.
Do you see any tents?
Nope.
Do you see anywhere where you guys could get some shade if it was getting too hot?
No, I don't. There was never any shaded areas for us during practice.
While you and Rory were running Burma Road out in the sun, did Coach Taylor ever give you a break?
He didn't.
What happened after you had been running Burma Road for a while?
After we were running that, Coach Taylor started yelling at Rory again, saying that he was dogging it and that he thinks he's so special, that he's the best player on the team, and that he'll have him see how special he really is, and called him back over to the practice field.
Why did he call him back over to the practice field?
He was going to have him start to do another drill, a slide tackling drill.
Now, what's a slide tackle?
A slide tackle is a move in soccer where you extend one leg and you try to kick a ball, slide and kick the ball away from the person that is dribbling the ball.
And when that happens, do people normally fall over?
You don't want that to happen. You're just trying to aim for the ball, but most of the time you end up either tripping up the person or that person ends up falling to the ground.
What was Rory wearing during this drill?
His jersey, his practice jersey,
And was he wearing pants or shorts?
shorts.
And did the other players, did they have on cleats?
They did. They had on our regular soccer cleats.
Aubrey, had you ever seen a drill like this done before?
No, we've never done a drill like this before.
What makes this drill unique from the other drills that you've experienced?
This drill was unique because Coach Taylor had Rory line up or with the ball and then had the rest of the team line up. And then he made each teammate one by one come and slide tackle Rory to try to get the ball away from him.
Did he ever switch who was being tackled?
Nope, it was just Rory.
Were you able to see how Rory looked during these tackling drills?
Yeah, he looked awful. He looked even worse than when he first started on Burma Road with me. He was even more lifeless, just looked like he was like he had nothing left in the gas tank.
At that point, did Coach tell Rory that he could take a break and get some water?
No, he didn't.
Was there any shade for you to rest from this heat?
There was not.
And during this time, did Rory ever tell Coach how he was feeling?
He didn't. Rory's not that kind of. Rory was the toughest person I knew, and he hardly ever told people when anything was wrong with him. Wanted to stay tough.
Did anyone really ever complain to Coach about how they were feeling?
Objection, speculation.
If I may, Your Honor. Oh, I'm sorry. I think you're mute.
Thank you. To the extent the witness knows the answer, he can answer.
I know that we, for the most part, would not want to complain to Coach Taylor because we knew if we ever brought up any reason like that, he would either make us run Burma Road or make us run a drill as a punishment.
Aubrey, I'd like to talk a little bit more in depth about those slide tackling drills. Were people doing this drill, were they taking Coach Taylor's punishment seriously?
Could you rephrase the question?
Sure. Were they actually tackling Rory, or were they kind of doing it more lightly?
They were going and actually tackling Rory. They also didn't want to probably get in trouble too. We have to do everything we can in practice.
And when they tackled Rory, was he falling down to the ground?
He was. I remember still the very first time that the first teammate came in, slide tackled Rory. He collapsed straight to the ground.
Did Coach Taylor stop after Rory had been knocked down 3 times?
No, he didn't.
Did the punishment stop after Rory had been knocked down 10 times?
No.
How many times did Coach Taylor allow Rory to get knocked to the ground?
15 times.
After Rory had been slide tackled to the ground 15 times in a row, what happened?
Rory, he fell to the ground for the last time, and he never got back up.
Did you call for help?
Yeah, we us teammates ended up calling 911. We got an ambulance to come for Rory.
Did they arrive in time?
No.
Aubrey, at any point before Rory was tackled to the ground for the 15th time, did Coach Taylor ever say stop?
No, he didn't.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Ready to proceed? Good afternoon, Mr. Saracen. How are you doing today?
Doing as best as I can right now.
I understand. I want to talk about a couple of things you spoke with Mr. Workin about, but before I do, I want to talk a little bit more about you and your relationship with the decedent. You and Rory were close friends, correct?
Yeah,
Like, you grew up together all throughout your childhood, right?
that's right.
And during your childhood, you two actually connected over playing soccer.
We
Right.
did.
And when you two weren't on the field playing soccer together, you would hang out with each other at each other's houses, right?
Right.
And eventually, as you became of age for high school, you both joined the varsity soccer team at Waco High, correct?
That's correct.
And in talking about your junior career or junior season in particular, you and the decedent were both starters on the team, right?
We were.
However, that changed your senior season, didn't it?
It did.
In fact, your senior season, you actually lost your full-time starting position to Coach Taylor's kid, right?
Yes.
I mean, you would agree with me that every athlete wants to be on the field as much as possible or all the time, right?
That's true.
So when Coach Taylor made that decision to limit your playing time, you actually were upset by that, right?
I was.
And you are familiar with the structure of this case, that it's the parent of your friend, Rory, against the coach that took your starting position away, right?
I am.
Now, I want to shift your attention a little bit and talk more about your friendship. Now, because you and the decedent were so close, you often would talk frequently, correct?
We would.
And actually, in September of 2018, he told you he was feeling stressed.
He did.
And when you two talked about it, he told you that he wanted to be a normal student, relax.
That's right.
She also said that she wishes her mom would kind of get off her back too, or he wishes his mom or dad would get off his back.
He said that, yes.
Now, you would agree with me that typically when someone is described as being on your back, it's typically a bad thing, right?
I would agree with you.
And you would also agree that, in his words, his parents put a lot of pressure on him to do well in school and perform in sports, right?
Yes.
And you can agree with me that stress can impact your decision-making, can't it?
It can.
In fact, you can make good decisions because of stress or bad decisions because of stress, right?
Yeah.
And we know that in times of stress, some people turn to exercise, right?
Yeah.
Some turn to their friends and family, correct?
Yes.
But in some
Objection,
cases,
Your Honor. To lack a foundation, this witness is, or opposing counsel is asking this witness to speculate about what other people might do to relieve their stress.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
and in fact, some people make the tragic decision of turning to drugs when they're stressed, right?
Yeah, some people do.
Now, I know you and Rory spent a lot of time together, but you didn't spend every hour of every day with him, did you?
That's true.
And even though you two were close, you can't say for certain one way or another whether he ever ingested cocaine, right?
That's right.
Now, I want to shift your attention again to September 7th, 2018, and I understand that Rory was a good friend of yours. So if you need a moment to compose yourself, feel free to do so. Now, on that day, you all had soccer practice, right?
We did.
And because it was September, you all had been practicing since August, correct?
Correct.
And this wasn't the first summer that you all were practicing for soccer, was it?
It was not.
In fact, you practiced your junior summer, sophomore summer, freshman summer, right?
That's true.
And typically, those Waco summers get pretty hot, don't they?
They can be, yeah.
But it wasn't unusual for you all to practice during that heat, was it?
No.
It also wasn't unusual for your coach, Coach Taylor, to use the Burma run as a form of conditioning and punishment either, right?
Right.
Now, up to September 7th, 2018, before the events that happened to the decedent, you aren't aware of any time in which anyone passed out from the Burma run, correct?
That's correct.
You aren't aware of any time where anyone from your team passed out from any drills that Coach Taylor had you all do, correct?
Correct.
Now, on that day, you had to do the Burma run, right?
I did.
And so did the decedent, correct?
That's true.
But you started your Burma run well before your friend, right?
Yeah.
In fact, you did the Burma run for almost 15 minutes until everything happened, right?
Right.
Now, while you two were doing this Burma run, he never once told you that he needed a break, did he?
No.
He never once told you that he was overheating, did he?
No.
Didn't say he felt hot.
No.
In fact, he never once even said he needed water or shade.
Right.
Now, eventually, as you just said, Coach Taylor stopped the decedent from participating in the Burma run and called him back over to the regular practice field. I get that correct?
Yes.
And when he came back over to the practice field, you didn't go and tell the coach that your friend was pale and not feeling well, did you?
I didn't.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the slide tackle. Now, in soccer, slide tackling is a part of the game, correct?
It is.
And over a 90-minute long soccer match, there could be a time in which someone has to encounter 15 slide tackles, right?
Yeah.
And working on a slide tackle is something that would help you be a better soccer player, correct?
Correct.
Now, while this drill was happening with Rory, she didn't tell anyone she wanted to stop, did she?
No, he didn't.
Or he didn't? Didn't ever once tell coach that he didn't want to do anymore, did he?
Correct.
But however, unfortunately, as we all know, Rory did collapse during that drill though, right?
He did.
And once he collapsed, Coach Taylor did stop the drill. The trainer did come in and they did call 911, didn't they?
Yeah, the trainer told us to call 911.
And the ambulance came.
Yeah.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Can you redirect? And I think you're muted, Olivia.
Thank you. May I proceed? Aubrey, Mr. Littlejohn at the beginning of his cross-examination asked you some questions about how you lost some of your field time to Coach Taylor's son. Did that color your testimony today in any way?
No, I didn't.
Did it affect the truth of what you told us during your direct examination?
No, it didn't.
And were you told to tell the truth before you came to court today?
I was.
And did you tell the truth during your testimony?
I did.
Oh, Mr. Littlejohn also asked you some questions about what Rory did not ask you. Without getting into the details of what he said, did he say anything that indicated he wasn't feeling well?
He did indicate that he wasn't feeling well.
And you told us on your direct examination that he was looking pretty pale. When he went over to run the slide tackle drills, where were you standing?
I was still over a little maybe a little closer to the practice field, but still pretty much over on the Burma Road side of the field.
And when you were standing all the way over on the Burma Road side of the field, could you tell that Rory was looking sickly from the practice field?
I could.
And where was Coach Taylor standing when Rory was doing these drills?
He was right next to all the teammates and Rory, who were all taking part in the drill.
Thank you. And Mr. Littlejohn also asked you about how common it is to get slide tackled during a soccer game. Have you ever experienced someone get slide tackled 15 times in a row without a break in between?
Never. I've never seen that.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, then barring anything else, this witness is excused.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests its case in chief.
Okay,
Your Honor, we have one matter we'd like to bring to the court's attention before we proceed.
sure.
At this time, defense would move pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure, Rule 50, for a judgment as a matter of law. At this time, there has been no legally sufficient evidentiary basis for you as the fact finder to conclude that the plaintiff has met their burden. All we've heard here today is that there was a practice in which it was hot outside. We don't know where or even if Coach Taylor breached his duty, and definitely haven't heard any evidence of that duty being breached causing the death of the decedent. For that reason, Your Honor, we ask that you find for a judgment as a matter of law and take this matter from the final verdict decided right now.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. When you're evaluating a motion for a judgment as a matter of law, you have to view all of the evidence we've heard thus far in a light most favorable to the non-moving party. In that case, it's the plaintiff. We have presented enough evidence today that a reasonable fact finder could find in our favor. You've heard testimony today that Rory Street was ordered to run Burma Road laps over and over again in 105-degree weather, and without any breaks, without any water, and without any shade. And then after doing those laps on repeat, Coach Taylor then again ordered her to do yet another punishment where she had to line up on the soccer field as 15 of her teammates tackled her to the ground over and over again. We heard testimony from Rory's teammate, Aubrey, and he said that Rory was not looking great, that he was very sickly and he looked very pale. And despite Rory's appearance, Coach Taylor ordered for these punishments to continue and never said that they could stop. We have showed that Coach Taylor breached his duty of care to his team member, Rory, as a coach of this team, as a coach of minors at a high school soccer team. And we showed that that breach was the cause of death of Rory Street. We elicited testimony from a doctor in today's case, Dr. Mcconaughey. He said that the cause of death was likely not cocaine, but with a reasonable degree of medical certainty, it was heat stroke and heat exhaustion that caused the sudden death of Rory Street.
Okay, the motion is denied right now.
At this time, Your Honor, defense is ready to proceed and the court's ready.
Okay, let me just give you guys a quick time check so you know. So plaintiff, you have about 28 minutes left, and defense, you have about 32 and a half minutes left.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, as we discussed in motions and limit, Your Honor, I'd like for my co-counsel to be able to join me on the Zoom call and read the expert testimony from our expert, Dr. Mr. London.
Okay.
Hello again, Ms. Light. You got your mute on.
I apologize, sorry.
It's okay. Do you have exhibit 18 and 19 in front of you?
Yes.
Can we turn to exhibit 19 first, please?
Yes, just 1 second.
Take your time.
Okay, are you able to see Exhibit 19?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Now, can you read for us the first two lines that are highlighted at the top of the paper?
Yes. Spencer London, Toxicology Associates, LLC.
And where it says education, can you read the university and the degree that was awarded?
Texas State University, BS in Toxicology.
And then looking down further on the page where it says previous trial experience, can you read that to us as well?
Have been retained as an expert in toxicology in over 200 cases.
Thank you. I want to turn your attention now to Exhibit 18. If you could pull that up for us, please. Now, can you read the top line for Exhibit 18, please?
Spencer London, Toxicology LLC, Toxicology Associates LLC.
And can you turn to page 2 of this exhibit? And looking at the overview of opinion portion, can you please read those two sentences or two lines?
Here's the opinion that I have reached in this case. Based on a reasonable degree of professional and/or medical certainty, Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine.
And then looking at the analysis, can you read the first 3 lines or 2 lines and part of the 3rd line?
According to the toxicology report, when Rory Street's blood was drawn and tested at approximately 1930 hours on September 8th, 2018, it tested positive for 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine.
And then looking at the cocaine can lead to the following symptoms. Can you read those bullet points for us?
Cocaine can lead to the following symptoms: constricted blood vessels, dilated pupils, nausea and vomiting, raised body temperature and blood pressure, fast or irregular heartbeat, tremors and muscle twitches, restlessness, and chest pains.
Thank you. Now, in turning to page 3, can you read that first paragraph?
Dr. Mcconaughey describes the following symptoms for Rory Street on the day in question: struggling, unusually pale, feeling funny, complained of chest pain, hands on his hips, breathing heavy, groaning, twitching, and convulsing. Many of these symptoms are consistent with cocaine use. Rory complained of chest pain, feeling funny, which could be related to any number of the symptoms of cocaine use, groaning, which could be related to nausea, and convulsing and twitching on the ground. All of these symptoms are consistent with cocaine use.
Can you read those 2 lines following?
Additionally, the autopsy report in this case indicates that Rory Street's heart showed signs of myocarditis, which is an inflammation or swelling of the heart muscle. Myocarditis is one of the physical symptoms associated with cocaine use, which means this finding is also consistent with cocaine use.
And then can you read the following paragraph as well?
It is true that the amount of cocaine found in Rory Street's system was nominal, only 60 nanograms. However, Rory Street's blood was drawn long after his death and potentially even longer after Rory actually ingested the cocaine. Therefore, this test may not represent the actual amount of cocaine that was in Rory Street's blood at the time of the incident or earlier in the day. And it is possible that the amount of cocaine in the system was actually much higher throughout the course of that day leading up to practice. Based on the foregoing, it is my opinion within a reasonable degree of medical probability that Rory Street's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine.
Thank you, Ms. Light. That concludes testimony. Pass the witness.
Okay, plaintiff, do you have anything you wanted to read in?
Not at this time, Your Honor. It's our understanding that we're not actually allowed to call this witness as a witness. We're only allowed to use the exhibit as an exhibit.
Okay. Defense, your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, I would also like to call my opposing co-counsel, Ms. Madeline Light, to help me read the deposition testimony of a witness that's been previously stipulated as unavailable pursuant to a pretrial order, who will be Jesse Merriweather.
Okay.
Hello again, Ms. Light.
Well,
Are you able to have the deposition testimony of Mr. Merriweather in front of you?
yes.
Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
And what is your job at Waco High?
I am an athletic trainer and I also teach health.
And what is the job of an athletic trainer at a high school?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some level of physical activity and competition. Everything from football to soccer to volleyball to cheerleading and drill team. As a trainer, I work with the students that participate in those activities to keep them healthy and in shape and to treat any injuries that they have.
Turning to page 3, question line 4. Do you attend practices?
Yes. Depending on what time of year it is, it may be football or soccer or something else, but there is always a trainer at any official practice for our various athletic teams.
Turning to line 24. Are you familiar with Coach Reese Taylor?
I am.
Who is Coach Taylor?
Coach Taylor is the varsity soccer coach at Waco High.
Have you worked with Coach Taylor?
I have.
Do you know who Rory Street was?
Yes, I knew Rory. Very sad what happened.
How did you know Rory?
Well, he was a varsity soccer player, so I worked with him as a trainer for the varsity soccer team, just like any other player.
Had you heard about Rory doing drugs, or did you ever see anything that would lead you to believe Rory did drugs?
On several occasions, I saw Rory lingering outside with the smokers after lunch. There are a bunch of kids in that group of smokers and vapors that have a reputation for using drugs. So it wouldn't surprise me if Rory did too. Drugs are a problem at every level of sports, from high school through the pros. And it isn't just steroids. In fact, every year I give a lecture at the local Kiwanis Club chapter meeting about the negative effects of drug abuse on young athletes. Several of our players came to hear that speech, but Rory never came.
Turning to line 20. You said that you worked with Rory as an athletic trainer. Did you interact with Rory in any other capacity?
Rory was in my health class that year, so I would see him 3 days out of every week in health class.
Was Rory a good student?
He was smart, if that's what you're asking, but I wouldn't call him a good student.
Why not?
Rory was always a discipline problem. It seemed like he thought he could do whatever he wanted to because he was a star athlete. And the worst part is that nothing fazed him. You could send Rory to the principal's office all day long, but he didn't care because that was just an excuse to get out of class. The only discipline I ever saw work on Rory was Coach Taylor's discipline.
Turning to page 7, line 8 to 16. Jess, were you familiar with Rory's handwriting?
I mean, I certainly had seen his handwriting before on tests and homework that he would turn in, so I was familiar with his handwriting as any other student that I had in class.
Based on your familiarity with Rory Street's handwriting, does the handwriting in Exhibit 12 appear to be Rory Street's handwriting? And I want to pull that up for a brief moment. Your Honor, permission for the witness to pull up what's been previously marked as Exhibit 12.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, I would just like to note my objection to this exhibit as hearsay and as a lack of authenticity and lack of foundation.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. First, addressing the foundation, this witness testified that he was, in fact, the teacher for Rory, that he was familiar with the handwriting through examinations and tests that were given to Rory. That is sufficient foundation for me to begin to ask questions about a handwritten note. Now, to authenticity, under the Federal Rule of Evidence, Rule 901B2, a document, particularly handwriting, can be authenticated when a person that is familiar with their handwriting is able to corroborate it. And that's exactly what Mr. Merriweather is able to do with his familiarity. And now to the hearsay objection, this will then go to a then existing mental state or condition, as it is a plan to purchase snow and buy some more. So for those reasons, this evidence is admissible, Your Honor.
Plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, opposing counsel has not laid sufficient foundation that Rory Street was the one who wrote this note. We haven't heard any testimony from Mr. Mayweather that Rory Street, or that the witness observed Rory Street writing this note. We don't know where this note was found. We furthermore have a good faith belief that this note is signed RS, but that there are multiple people in Ms. Merriweather's class that have those initials. We don't have anything else that was written by Rory so that we can compare the two and make sure that they are the same handwriting. And furthermore, we don't know when this note was written. And to admit this into evidence is only going to prejudice today's trial. It has nothing to do with what actually happened on the day in question. And to Mr. Littlejohn's argument that this is going towards 8033, there is a statement on this note that says, "I really enjoyed the snow that I bought from you yesterday." That is not a plan looking forward into the future, but rather talking about something that has happened in the past.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes, briefly.
We're more than capable to lay more foundation. However, if opposing counsel would not like the snow, I'm confused as what she's saying about "I really like the snow." That is still can be then existing mental state. It's a condition that she's in at that moment.
Are you intending to admit this entire exhibit or just read portions of it?
I would like to admit this exhibit into evidence, Your Honor. It's relevant. And Rory Street was in the class that the teacher found this note in. Now, as far as it not having a date or a name or anything of that nature, that's an argument for weight, not admissibility.
Okay, can you lay the foundation of when the note was found, the circumstances? And
Yes,
if
Your Honor.
that, then it can be admitted.
One moment. Ms. Light, I'm going to turn your attention to page 6, line 11. Jess, I'm showing what has been marked as Exhibit 12. Do you know what this is?
Yes, that is a note I found in my health class one day after class ended.
Where did you find the note exactly?
It was just a couple feet away from Rory's desk in a nearby aisle.
And when did you find this note?
It was a week before Rory's death.
Your Honor, if I may, I believe that should be a sufficient foundation for this witness to testify about what she witnessed when she found this note.
Okay, the objection is overruled.
Now, it's like, can you pull Exhibit 12 up in front of Your Honor?
Yes, are you able to see it?
Yes, thank you so much. It's like, can you read Exhibit 12 for us, please?
Yes. Clint, I really like the snow you sold me yesterday. Can I buy some more? Let me know in health class. R.S.
Thank you. You can pull Exhibit 12 down a slide. Turning your attention to page 8, line 8. Were you at practice the day Rory died?
I was.
At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in a way that would have indicated she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Turning to page 9, line 1. Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. And here's the thing. I'm there to take care of those players, and they know it. I'm kind of a combination trainer and a guardian to the team. So they trust me, and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word, and he would have. Rory was a tough kid, but he knew his limits and would let me or coach know when he needed water.
Turning to question or line 9. Are players allowed to get water when they want it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Your Honor, that concludes the deposition testimony on behalf of the defense. Pass the witness.
Okay, plaintiff, do you have anything you want to read in?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, Mr. Flynn, I'll be starting on page 7 with line 22. Let me know when you get there.
I'm there.
Jess, I'm showing you what has been marked as Exhibit 13. Do you know what this is?
Yes, this is the list of students that were in the health class with Rory, the class where I found the note.
And Mr. Flynn, could you please locate Exhibit 13 for us?
Yes, I've got it in front of me.
And would you please publish it? Now, on this list that was just mentioned in the deposition, is there another name on this list with the initials RS?
Yes, there is.
Where is that name?
Ron Slater down there at the bottom.
Thank you. Now I'll be continuing on page 8, line 8. Were you at practice the day that Rory died?
I was.
Did you see Rory run Burma Road?
I saw Rory over on Burma Road, but I wasn't watching him closely.
Did you see Rory during the slide tackling drill?
Again, I saw that it was happening, and I certainly saw parts of it, but I didn't watch it closely.
What were you doing while all of this was going on?
I was taping another student's ankle about 40 yards away.
I'm turning to page 10, line 6. Do you still work at Waco High?
Yeah, I got promoted to head trainer about 2 months ago. So it's going great.
Do you still work with Coach Taylor?
Of course I do. I work with all the coaches, Coach Taylor included. In fact, Coach Taylor is the one who wrote me the recommendation letter for the promotion to head trainer. Again, Coach Taylor has a lot of faith in me and my abilities, and I just want to impress him.
Thank you. That's all I was planning on reading at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Coach Reese Taylor. Ready to proceed, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good afternoon. My name is Reese Taylor.
And Mr. Taylor, why are you here today?
I'm here because Rory Street died at practice.
Now, before we discuss that practice, I want to talk a little bit more about your background. Did you go to college?
I did. I went to Texas A&M.
When you were at Texas A&M, what'd you study?
I studied physical education.
And once you graduated from Texas A&M, what'd you do next?
I became a coach.
And where did you become a coach?
Did you say when or where?
Where?
Where? Just at a local high school at Waco High. Well, not Waco High, but another high school, University High School, I think it was.
I understand. Now, are you from Waco?
I am from Waco, yes.
And for about how long have you been coaching here in Waco?
For about 26 years in total.
And just talking about your actual time with Waco High, for about how long have you been coaching there?
I've been there for about 6 years.
And while you were a coach for Waco for 6 years, did you ever attend any workshops for coaches?
I did, yes. It was quite common for me to go to different types of coaching clinics and things of that nature.
And why are those coaching clinics important?
I mean, as a coach, you want to be the best coach that you can be, and you want your team to be successful, but you also want to do it safely. So those clinics kind of speak to that and help me become a better coach in all regards.
Now, I want to shift your attention to your relationship with the decedent, Rory Street, and your other players as well. How did you treat your players?
I treated them with respect, but I also respected. I also expected respect in return. So it was a give and take with my players for sure.
And how would you describe your demeanor as a coach?
I think that I would describe myself as fair but firm.
Now, we've heard testimony here today that you were a tough coach. Do you believe you were too tough?
No, I don't think so. I think, like I said, I was fair but firm with my players. It was a give and a take.
And in being fair and firm with your players, did you ever decide to use discipline to help the structure of your team?
Yeah, I think discipline is essential to having a successful team, a successful soccer team. And so I definitely employed that in my coaching tactics.
Did you ever use any unreasonable or overly harsh tactics?
No, nothing that I wouldn't do to myself or my kids.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the decedent, Rory, now. How can you describe Rory as a talent as far as soccer goes?
Oh, he was great. He was our star player. Great kid, outstanding athlete. I would describe him as superhuman.
We also heard from a teammate of Rory, Aubrey, earlier here today. Are you familiar with Aubrey?
I am, yes. He's another player on the soccer team.
And can you tell us your opinion of him?
Yeah, I mean, he was once a varsity player, a starting varsity player, but he has a really nasty attitude. And I've had a lot of issues with him. So his spot he was replaced on the soccer team as starting.
Now, I want to shift your attention to September 7th, 2018. And I too understand, much like Aubrey, that you lost a player of yours. So if you need to take your time to talk about it, feel free to do so.
Yes, sir.
What did you have planned for practice that day?
We were just going to run our typical scrimmage. We typically run a full scrimmage, once or twice a week. And on that particular day, we had a scrimmage planned.
And was Rory at practice?
He was.
Can you describe how Rory was performing at practice that day?
Yeah, he was not performing like how he typically does. He was kind of lollygagging and dogging it and just kind of missing plays that he would typically make and missing wide open shots and just not like him.
And when you saw this, what'd you do?
I got onto him and I told him he needed to kind of get it together, quit lollygagging and take practice serious.
Now, I want to talk about the things that happened after you kind of got onto him. What'd you tell him to do after you began to express your frustration?
Yeah, so after that, I told him to run Burma Road. It's a tradition here.
And is Burma Road something that your players and even players before you would do?
Yeah, it's a Waco High tradition. It's been around for a long time. Whenever I attended Waco High, it was something that I even ran myself. So it was nothing unordinary or anything like that.
Are you aware of any time in which a player anywhere at Waco High has ever been hurt or passed out from Burma Road?
No, never.
Now, what happened after Rory went to Burma Road?
So after that, he began running Burma Road for a bit, and I was kind of watching from a distance, and he was lollygagging again, just kind of not taking it very serious.
So what'd you do next?
After that, I called him over to the field that we were at, and I had him line up, and we conducted another drill.
And when you called him over, did he ever tell you that he was feeling bad?
No, never.
Did he ever ask for water?
No, not at all.
Did he ever ask for a break?
No, nothing.
And did you have your trainers and athletic trainers at that practice?
I did. I had them with me, of course.
Did any of them ever tell you that Rory asked for any of those things?
No, not at all.
Now, when this drill started, what was the drill supposed to be testing?
So what's very common in soccer is slide tackling. And so this particular drill was geared at that aspect of the game.
Was it also supposed to be something that would be difficult and challenge Rory as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything in practice is kind of, challenging.
Now, are slide tackles something that you need your team to be good at, though?
Of course, especially if you're an offensive player, it's something that you're going to have to deal with at games. So they should, be used to it or know what to expect.
Now, at that point in time, on September 7, 2018, Were you aware that there were drugs in Rory's system?
No, I had no idea.
When did you become aware of it?
It wasn't until after the fact, until after everything happened. It's whenever I kind of learned about that.
Your Honor, I'd like permission for my co-counsel to publish exhibits 14 and 15 before the witness.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe these are the exhibits that we addressed at the beginning of trial. My objection still stands. These documents are hearsay.
Your Honor, can we respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, these documents, exhibit 14 and 15, are McLennan County Medical Examiner Office reports, an autopsy report and a toxicology report. They are already stipulated as being authentic, which means they are what they purport to be. And for that reason, they fall under the Federal Rule of Evidence Exception 8, because they're a public record, because these are factual findings while under a legal duty to report. And therefore, they do not run afoul of the hearsay rule.
If I may, Your Honor, we have a good faith belief that this witness has never seen exhibits 14 and 15 and is going to be unable to lay the proper foundation that these exhibits are public records and that the person who created these exhibits was under a legal duty to report. We did stipulate that these exhibits were authentic, but we did not stipulate to their admissibility at trial, and they are hearsay.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes.
You don't need to be a custodian or a producer of a public record to discuss it. It simply has to be a public record. And because it's already been stipulated as an authentic McLennan County Medical Examiner's Office document, it passes the test for what a public record would be, Your Honor.
Okay, the objection's overruled. 14 and 15 are admitted.
Ms. Light, if you could please put exhibit 14 in front of the witness, in Your Honor. Coach Taylor, can you see exhibit 14?
I can, yes.
And what is the title of this document?
It is labeled as autopsy report.
And can you turn to where it says internal examination, or look to where it says internal examination?
Okay.
And can you read that paragraph for us, please?
Yes, it says an examination of the deceased throat was conducted due to the finding of cocaine during the blood draw and toxicology screen.
Objection, Your Honor, to cumulative. Opposing counsel is now just asking this witness who has never seen this document before to read whole paragraphs of it onto the record. This exhibit is already entered into evidence.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
The deceased throat was not irritated or raw, which would indicate infrequent or first-time use of cocaine, and it's not consistent with habitual or repeated use of that drug. An examination of the deceased brain revealed cerebral edema. Additionally, there were signs of muscle breakdown in various parts of the deceased body.
Can you please pull up page 2 as well, Ms. Light?
I apologize. Just 1 second.
You're fine. Coach Taylor, can you see that second page? It should be on the left side of your screen, I believe.
Yes, I see it.
Can you read the little sentence underneath opinion?
Yes, it says, while the cause of death is listed above, we are unable to determine the cause of the sudden cardiac death that took place in this case.
Your Honor, at this time, I ask that my co-counsel be allowed to highlight the statements underneath opinion.
Sure.
Please highlight that for us, Ms. Light. Thank you. And I want to turn your attention to exhibit 15, Coach Taylor. And Ms. Light, if you could pull that exhibit up for us as well. You see exhibit 15 in front of you, Coach Taylor?
Yes.
And what is it?
It says it's a toxicology report.
And can you go to the portion where it says toxicology followed by the colon? About midway down.
Yes.
And you see where it says specimen?
Yes.
Can you read the third row starting with blood?
Yes. It says blood, cocaine, positive. And then
Can you read that amount?
60 ng per milliliter, whatever that is.
Thank you. It's like if you could remove the exhibit. Coach Taylor, on September 8th or 7th, 2018, did you know that those substances were metabolizing in your player?
No, I had no idea.
Did you ever see him use drugs at all?
No, never.
If he had done drugs, what would you have done?
I would have had to sit down with him and talk to him about it and asked if he needed help or anything like that.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Before I begin, may I ask how much time I have remaining?
Yes, let's see. You are at 25:20.
Thank you, Your Honor. And good afternoon, Mr. Taylor.
Good afternoon.
My name's Olivia Dworkin, and I'm going to be asking you some questions on behalf of Mrs. Street, okay?
Okay.
If at any point my audio drops or my video stops, just flag it for me and let me know, okay?
Okay.
Well, Mr. Taylor, you describe yourself as pretty competitive, right?
Yes, I would say so.
You actually used to be an athlete yourself, is that right?
Yes.
And ever since your days as an athlete, you knew that you wanted to be a coach.
Yes.
You actually went on to get your degree in physical education,
Correct.
and you started coaching right after you graduated.
I did.
And that means you've been a coach now for about 26 years,
About so, yes.
and you're a high school coach.
I am.
And that means that you coach people who are 14 to 18 years old.
Yeah, in that range.
And you also said on your direct examination that you have kids yourself. Is that right?
Yes.
How old are your kids?
12 and 10.
Do they play sports?
They do.
Oh, Mr. Taylor, you take your job very seriously, right?
I do.
You make sure to keep up to date on the latest and the best coaching techniques.
I do.
And to do so, you attend coaching clinics all around the state of Texas, right?
Yes.
You attend those coaching clinics several times a year. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, it's safe to say that because you attend so many of these clinics, you're pretty familiar with the practices that are recommended at these clinics.
Yes.
And being a distinguished coach, I'm assuming that you follow these practices.
I do.
Well, I'd like to talk to you about one conference in particular that you attended. In 2018, you attended the annual meeting of the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association. Is that right?
That's right.
There was a slideshow presentation at that meeting,
Yes.
and you'd recognize that slideshow if I showed it to you.
I would.
Your Honor, permission to have the witness look at Exhibit 11 in the digital exhibit binder. I believe you're muted, Your Honor.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Taylor, if you could please pull up Exhibit 11 and let me know when you get there.
Okay, I have that pulled up.
Mr. Taylor, that's that slideshow that you saw at that conference, right?
Yes.
It doesn't appear to have been changed in any way.
No.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff would move to enter Exhibit 11 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection to hearsay.
Response?
May I be heard? Yes, Your Honor. Hearsay under Rule 801 is an out-of-court statement being brought into court to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Now, we're not bringing Exhibit 11 in to prove the truth of the matter asserted, that these are the practices that you must follow. We're rather bringing this exhibit in to show that Mr. Taylor had knowledge of certain things that he might do when practices reach a certain temperature, and we're merely bringing this in to contrast those practices with the practices that Mr. Taylor actually followed. Mr. Taylor actually just told me that he follows these practices, and this exhibit goes to show that that's simply not true.
Okay, overruled.
Mr. Flynn, could you please
Your Honor, just a point of clarification. Is it overruled as far as it is now being able to be argued for its truth, or just simply for the knowledge?
In that it's not argued, I understand that it's not being argued for the truth, but it's for the knowledge.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mr. Flynn, could you please publish Exhibit 11? And Mr. Taylor, you can see Exhibit 11 published here.
Yes.
Now, on the second page of this document, there are standards listed for if you have to practice in the heat, right?
Yes.
Now, there are standards for when temperatures reach 96 to 99 degrees, right?
Yes.
And then there are standards in place for when temperatures reach 100 degrees or above. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, as a coach, you actually like to use the heat to your advantage. Is that right?
Yeah, it's good conditioning.
It's good conditioning, but your September games, they happen at night. Isn't that right?
They do.
But to condition your athletes, you practice in the sun, right?
Yeah, it's the best way to condition them for any weather.
And you choose to do that because it toughens up your players. Is that right?
Yeah, it conditions them.
September 7th, 2018, it was pretty hot outside, right?
Yes, it was.
It did not cool down as practice went on.
Correct.
It actually got hotter. Is that right?
It did get warm. Yes.
It reached over 100 degrees that day.
I believe so.
Mr. Taylor, can you tell us what the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association says about taking breaks when temperatures reach 100 degrees?
Yeah, it says that practices must include a 5-minute break every 15 minutes of practice in the shade if possible.
And you said that you follow these practices. So when you sent Rory to run Burma Road, where did she take her 5-minute break?
She didn't.
She didn't take a 5-minute break?
No.
Well, Mr. Taylor, was Rory at least running in the shade?
No, there's no trees on the soccer field.
Are there any tents for the players to sit under when they're not playing?
No.
Well, surely after you had Rory run Burma Road, she then took her 5-minute break, right?
No.
Did she grab a sip of water?
No, she didn't ask.
So, Mr. Taylor, instead of letting Rory take a break and get some water, you actually imposed yet another punishment, right?
I had her run another drill. Yes.
And this punishment, that involved slide tackling, right?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you some questions about that. Being a soccer player yourself, you're quite familiar with slide tackles, right?
Yes.
You describe them as hard tackles, right?
Yes.
You'd say that they involve a lot of physical contact between the players.
There is physical contact involved. Yes.
And those reasons are actually the reasons you chose to do this drill in the first place, right?
I mean, it was for discipline because she was just lollygagging.
And as a coach, you know that slide tackling can cause serious injury to both of the players involved, right?
If done improperly.
And each time a slide tackle occurs, the person being tackled can fall to the ground, right?
It's possible.
Mr. Taylor, tell me this. Out of every 10 slide tackles that occur, how many of those would you say are dangerous?
I have no idea. There's no way that I could determine that.
I'm just looking for a number here.
I have no idea.
More than 2?
Maybe.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered. Witnesses testified that he has no idea.
Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. More than 0?
Possibly.
Now, on September 7th, 2018, you created a drill where Rory would get slide tackled over and over again, right?
I did.
Mr. Taylor, which coaching clinic did you learn this drill from?
I can't recall. I don't think I did.
Well, actually, you made up this drill yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, that's what coaches do.
You had never done this drill before.
No.
But you wanted to make sure that Rory got the point that his attitude was inappropriate, right?
I was trying to teach him discipline, yes.
So you lined up the entire team 10 yards away from him, right?
Yes.
You told the team that whenever you blew that whistle, they were supposed to run at Rory, right?
Yes.
And they did.
Yes.
And after that first tackle, did you give Rory a break?
No.
Did you say that they could stop?
No.
After 5 straight tackles in a row, did you give Rory a break?
No.
Did you say that they could stop?
No.
You actually kept going, right?
That's correct.
After 10 tackles, did you give Rory a break?
No.
Did you say that they could stop?
No.
You kept going after those 10 tackles, is that right?
That's correct.
And at this point, you saw that she was visibly struggling, didn't you?
I mean, looked tired. Everybody else.
And she looked like she was struggling.
Yeah.
But when Rory looked like he was struggling, you didn't stop the drill, did you?
No.
You ordered 5 more tackles on him.
Yes.
And on that 15th tackle, Rory didn't get up, did he?
No.
He collapsed on the field
Yeah.
and he died before medical help could arrive.
Unfortunately, yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Correct.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I do, can I get a time check, please?
Yes, you are at 9:30.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. Free to rate. Coach Taylor, where was your high school located?
In Waco.
And where were your players that played for your high school team located?
At Waco.
And every summer, would they have to practice in the Waco heat?
Always.
And up to September 7, 2018, did you ever have a player fall out or
No.
suffer exhaustion or die?
No, never. Nothing like that.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, anything further from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, I'd just like to renew our Rule 50 judgment as a matter of law.
Okay, that'll be tonight.
With that,
Before we,
that concludes.
sorry, go ahead, Mr.
I do
Little.
apologize. That concludes the defense case in chief.
Okay. Plaintiff, are we ready?
Yes, Your Honor. May we have a quick 2-minute break to set up for closing arguments?
Very quickly, because we are running up against the clock.
Yes, Your Honor. All right. May I proceed? May it please the court. On the Waco High soccer team, you don't stop when you're tired. You don't stop when you're sick. You stop when Coach Taylor says stop. On September 7th, 2018, Coach Taylor never said stop. On September 7th, 2018, when it was 105 degrees outside, when Rory had already run Burma Road on repeat, when Rory had already been tackled to the ground 14 times in a row, Coach Taylor never said stop. Instead, he ordered that 15th tackle that robbed a bright young man of his future. That 15th tackle that robbed Rory Street of his life. We are here today seeking justice for the tragic death of Rory Street. But it's important that we remember today we're in civil court, not criminal court. That matters today because in a criminal courtroom, you have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. And in this case, the standard is much lower. It's more likely than not, meaning we had to show you that it was more likely true than not true that Mr. Taylor's actions caused the death of Rory Street. And the other important distinction between this case and a criminal case is that nobody's going to jail here. Everyone we heard from today is going home from their families. Jordan Street is the only one who can't. But we're not here today asking you to find Mr. Taylor liable out of sympathy. No. You should return a verdict in favor of the plaintiff today because that is the verdict that the law requires. Now, the law says that we had to show you 3 things today to meet that more likely than not standard. We had to show that Mr. Taylor owed a duty to Rory to conduct practices in a reasonable and safe manner, that Mr. Taylor breached that duty, and third, that that breach was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. We have met that burden today. And to show you why, let's walk through those elements one by one, starting with breach, or with duty. We had to show you today that Mr. Taylor owed a duty of care to Rory Street. This element's actually quite easy. No one has contested today that a duty of care existed. These children that Mr. Taylor is in charge of are high school students. They're minors between 14 and 18 years old. Rory Street was just 18 years old when he died. These kids' parents sign them up for high school soccer and send them off to school expecting them to go to practice afterwards and expecting for Mr. Taylor, an adult with years of experience, years of coaching clinics, to take care of them. Mr. Taylor and the trainer are the only adults out on the field during those practices. He absolutely had a duty to make sure that those practices were safe. If not him, who else? We have met our burden here, which brings us to our next element of breach. We had to show you that Mr. Taylor breached that duty of care, and we have done just that. Conditions that day were harsh before anyone even stepped onto the field. Even though their games were played at night when the air was cool and the sun was down, Mr. Taylor required his players to practice in the hottest part of the day. On September 7th, 2018, when their practice started around 3 o'clock, it was already 100 degrees. It was up to over 100 degrees by the time that Rory stepped onto that field for the last time in his life. And that temperature continued to climb until Rory dropped dead. You heard today that when the star player of the team was off his game, Coach Taylor didn't ask Rory if he was okay or if he needed a break. Instead, Mr. Taylor screamed at Rory that he was going to run him until he passed out on Burma Road. And so that's exactly what the coach ordered. So off Rory went to the infamous punishment, and with the sun beating down in 100-degree weather, Rory Street sprinted 30 yards, dribbled 30 yards, and then bear crawled on his hands and knees 60 yards all the way back to the start. And Rory did this over and over and over again until Coach Taylor said he could stop. But it wasn't to take a break or to get some water. It was so that Mr. Taylor could impose yet another punishment because he didn't think that Rory was getting the point. And at this point, Mr. Taylor stepped out on a limb. You see, people had practiced before in the heat, and many people had run on Burma Road. But in order to make sure that Rory Street was properly punished, Mr. Taylor created a brand new drill that had never been tested before. This drill was where all of Rory's team members would line up 10 yards in front of him and run at him and tackle him to the ground every time the coach blew the whistle. Now, Rory had to do this over and over again until Coach Taylor said he could stop. And before lining up for the first hit, Rory wasn't given a break. There was no shade to be found, no water to be had, just the bare field and the sun beating down on him. It was under these conditions that 18-year-old Rory, looking pale and visibly shaking, began the last soccer drill of his life. Coach Taylor blew that whistle, and Rory's teammates ran at him over and over again, each time slamming him to the ground. And each time, Rory got back up only to be tackled to the ground again. Mr. Taylor repeats this drill a fourth time, a fifth time, a sixth time, a 10th time, and a 15th time, and still didn't believe that Rory had learned his lesson. Heat, safety, and common sense out of the window, Coach Taylor didn't say stop. So Rory Street lined up for that 15th straight hit. Except this one, he didn't get up from. Now, Mr. Littlejohn came before you today and tried to say that these actions didn't amount to a breach of duty, that these drills were standard practices. But just because this practice wasn't unusual doesn't make it right. And if you don't believe me, consider the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association. Now, that association is very specific about recommendations for holding safe practices in the heat. Now, Coach Taylor stood before you and he told you that he went to this conference, that he saw this slideshow. Now, the association, they say when you're practicing in 100-degree weather, there must be a 5-minute water break every 15 minutes of practice. Now, Coach Taylor, he said that he follows these practices. But when I asked him where Rory took his break, he said he didn't take one at all. With temperatures above 100 degrees, Mr. Taylor would permit maybe one water break throughout the entirety of a 2 to 3 hour practice. Despite the instructions being clear, Mr. Taylor ignored them. With temperatures above 100 degrees, Mr. Taylor would permit no breaks, no time in the shade, no time to rest. But it wasn't just on heat guidance that Coach Taylor ignored these standards. That same association advises caution when you're going to be teaching slide tackling. It says that it can be very dangerous and you need to instruct everyone on how to do it properly. But the drill that Coach Taylor came up with that day, it didn't include instructions on how to do it properly. It didn't include instructions on how to not fall to the ground. In fact, Coach Taylor sent Rory Street to the ground 15 straight times in a row, with nothing to protect her but a shin guard. We have met our burden here, which brings us to causation. We had to show that this breach of duty caused Rory Street's death, and that's exactly what you heard today. Now, you have Dr. Mcconaughey's expert report in front of you, and you'll have it when you make your decision. That's Exhibit 16. And I want for you to look at Dr. Mcconaughey's opinion on Rory's cause of death. Dr. Mcconaughey stated with a reasonable degree of medical certainty that Rory died as a result of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. What's more, this medical doctor said that Rory did not die because of cocaine usage. Now, the defense also submitted an expert report, one of Mr. London, but I'd like for you to compare Mr. London's CV with Dr. Mcconaughey's CV. Well, Mr. Littlejohn is right. Mr. London does have a bachelor's degree in toxicology, but that's it. Dr. Mcconaughey double majored in biology and chemistry, and then went on to medical school, where he received his MD. Dr. Mcconaughey is board certified in cardiology by the American Board of Internal Medicine and has over 20 years of experience in the field. The defense still tried to confuse you by saying that Rory somehow died as a result of cocaine usage, but we know that's not true. All we have is evidence that 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine was found in Rory's system when he died. But Dr. Mcconaughey, a board-certified doctor of internal medicine, stated that this amount, it's nominal and unlikely to cause the death that Rory Street suffered. We know that Rory Street's death was caused by heat stroke. September 7th, 2018 was a tragedy. A tragedy that was preventable had Coach Taylor just acted as any reasonable person would. Had he just told the players to stop? Had he just done what he should have done in the first place? We must hold him accountable for his actions. Find Reese Taylor liable.
Yes, Your Honor, just a brief moment to set up my web camera.
Sure. And you have 9 minutes, 5 seconds.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, while Mr. Littlejohn is setting up the camera, may I inquire as to how much time I have left for rebuttal?
Yes, let me do the math very quickly. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Welcome.
Ready to proceed when the court's ready.
Go ahead.
Dangerous substances can lead to dangerous consequences. And on September 7th, 2018, when the decedent was metabolizing a dangerous substance like cocaine, he fell victim to the result of the deadly consequences of that drug. Your Honor, this story is a sad one. On September 7, 2018, while the decedent is participating in Coach Taylor's drugs, he's out in the Waco heat. And Coach Taylor doesn't even know that his star player has recently decided to experiment using a deadly drug. And instead of being able to provide the decedent with the guidance and care that he would normally provide, he leaves him out on the practice field. And just moments later, Coach Taylor, just like the teammates, were shocked by the fact that the decedent collapsed and fell dead on that field. Your Honor, that's why we're brought here today. The fact that the decedent ingested cocaine and was out in the sun, exerting forces on him that resulted in him having detrimental effects on his heart. Now, in just a few moments, as you know, you'll be presented with a verdict form. And you'll have to answer the questions that opposing counsel just walked you through. And I, too, want to address those questions and the evidence you should consider when you find that the plaintiff failed to meet their burden today. Now, first question to ask, Was Coach Taylor negligent? And was Coach Taylor's negligence the proximate cause of the death of the decedent? And Your Honor, I want to be very clear. There's no contention here today that Coach Taylor owed a duty to the decedent. We're not shying away from that, and we understand that. But the duty that he owes is of ordinary care to what a reasonable person would do in the same or similar circumstances. And what we have not seen here today, Your Honor, is that Coach Taylor breached the duty of care that an ordinary person would exercise. Instead, we heard evidence from Coach Taylor that they were in school in Waco. You heard one of his own players, Abby, the plaintiff's witness, that they practiced in the Waco heat their senior year, their junior year, and their sophomore year. You heard that while they were practicing in that heat, the trainer was there to supervise and make sure the players were being responsible. And you heard that on the day in question, they were running different drills, like the Burma Run and the slide tackling drill. Now, we heard evidence here today that the slide tackling drill was a drill that is familiar to the sport of soccer. Coach Taylor told you that slide tackling is one of the most important skills that a soccer player can have. So yes, they were working on that drill. And Your Honor, just because the drill is difficult doesn't mean it's unreasonable. But on top of this, I pointed to the Burma Run. The Burma Run, which we heard from not only Coach Taylor, but even the decedent's father, which existed for years at Waco High. And that run was something that was ordinarily done. Now, in an attempt to convince you otherwise, the opposing counsel tried to establish a duty that was breached by pointing to that slide tackling drill, by pointing to the fact that they were out there in 104-degree temperatures. But what do we know, Your Honor? Coach Taylor nor his training staff were ever made aware of any point in which the decedent needed a break or needed water. Opposing counsel brought before you the Texas High School Athletic Association PowerPoint on when players should be getting water, and it said they should get water every 5 minutes or every 15 minutes. But Coach Taylor and his staff do even better. They allow players to leave whenever they want to get water. So when you ask yourselves, was it unreasonable for the team to be out there in that heat? You should know the answer is no. And then you ask yourself, was it unreasonable for Coach Taylor to have the decedent participate in the drills? You think that in soccer games, slides can happen at 15 to 20 times a game. That's something that is ordinarily happening in the sport. And when you think about running a Burma Run, with dribbling the ball and kicking it into a goal, that's something that ordinarily happens in the sport. And because the plaintiff failed to point to any credible evidence of anything that was not ordinary to the sport, they failed to meet their burden by a preponderance of the evidence, and they haven't even established there was a breach. However, they also failed to establish proximate cause as well. And proximate cause states that there will only be a proximate cause when the negligent conduct had a reasonably foreseeable outcome, which resulted in the decedent's death. And Your Honor, the plaintiff failed to establish proximate cause as well. Now, opposing counsel came before you and tried to point to the nature of the drills and being in practice as the cause of the death of the decedent. But let's be clear, Your Honor. The decedent never passed out in June, didn't pass out in July, never once had these effects in his junior year, never once had those effects in his sophomore year. It wasn't until the decedent ingested cocaine that his heart began to stop. And how do we know that that's the case? Because contrary to what opposing counsel said, our expert, who's a toxicologist, who relies on things like a toxicology report, told you that when there was a blood specimen taken, the decedent had levels of cocaine in her system. And that's important, Your Honor, because those levels of cocaine, as we learned from our expert, were trace levels, which means they could have been higher, much higher, at the time that the actual collapse occurred. Now, when you ask yourself, what did the plaintiff do to establish causation? Brought before you your own witness, who was not the treating physician, who never once took a temperature to even come to the conclusion that the decedent overheated, who simply gave her opinion based on a cardiology degree, not toxicology. And for that reason, the plaintiff has failed to establish by the preponderance of evidence that Coach Taylor was the proximate cause. And because the plaintiff failed to establish neither negligence nor proximate cause, they failed to meet their burden here today, and they should not succeed. So when you answer question 1 on that verdict form, you should check Coach Taylor as not being negligent. Now, in just a few moments, you'll have a chance to fill that out yourself. And I'm confident when you do so, you'll return a verdict finding that Coach Taylor was not negligent nor responsible for the death of the decedent. And I'm confident this is something you will do because the evidence today has shown that on September 7th, 2018, while the defendant was under the influence of a dangerous substance like cocaine, she fell victim to that substance's deadly consequence. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Littlejohn just stood before you and talked about all the ways that Rory Street may have been responsible for his own death. But what he didn't tell you, that even if you believe Rory's actions may have contributed to his death, you can still find Coach Taylor liable if you believe that his actions were at least half to blame. That's because here in Texas, you may find both the plaintiff and a defendant in a wrongful death suit negligent. And if you do, you just need to assign percentages of fault to each party. I won't pretend to stand before you today and say that Rory didn't have cocaine in her system. I won't pretend to know whether Rory used cocaine in his life. But what we do know is that even if you believe that this had something to do with his death, the law still requires you to hold Mr. Taylor responsible for his actions. Mr. Taylor stood before you today and said that he didn't think he did anything wrong on September 7th, 2018. He said that he didn't do anything that he wouldn't do to his own kids. And I was curious, so I asked him how old his kids were. 10 and 12 years old. Mr. Taylor stood before you and said that he would run the same exact drills that killed Rory Street to his 10-year-old and his 12-year-old during their soccer practices. It was Coach Taylor who demanded that practices occur at the hottest time of the year. It was Coach Taylor that demanded that Rory Street run Burma Road over and over again. And it was Coach Taylor who demanded that Rory Street get tackled to the ground not just once, not twice, not 3 times, but 15 times until he never got up again. The defense cannot excuse all of these actions because a nominal amount of cocaine was found in Rory's system. We must do the right thing today and find the only verdict that the evidence allows, a verdict of liable. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I'm going to ask everybody, I know you've done this before, just hang out for a little bit until we get the okay that all of the ballots are good, and then I can go ahead and let y'all go.